Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
Tonight, I'm talking about where the wild things are. How many of you remember that story? Yeah? Yeah? I've been reading it to my grandchildren, and it's become our favorite because it doesn't really have a lot of words. If you remember, that's a lot of pictures. But it's really about a little boy who's acting up, and he gets sent to bed without his supper. And he is really, just really irritable, and he's in his room, and he's gone to bed without his supper. And in his room, it suddenly starts to change, and it changes into a jungle, and it changes into something wild. And then it says that a boat comes and takes him and sails across to an island where the wild things are. And they flash their terrible claws, and they show their terrible teeth, and they roll their terrible eyes, and they gnash their terrible teeth. Did I say that already? And then they roar and they growl and they do all this terrible stuff. And he becomes the tamer of all the wild things, and they make him king because he could look at them without blinking, and they're just mesmerized by him, and they follow him everywhere. Until one day he gets tired of doing all of this, and he wants to go back to a place where he is loved best of all. And so he tells them he's leaving, and they say, no, we love you so, stay here with us. And he just gets into his boat, and he sails away, and he comes all the way back, across the ocean, and he comes back into his room where there's this smell of his supper waiting. And he gets there, and it's still warm. I tell you that story because you're a wild thing. You're a wild thing, and I'm a wild thing. We're all wild things at heart. What is the meaning of that story? I don't know. You're going to have to figure that story out for yourself. But what does it really mean to be wild and uncouth and inappropriate and wrong and bad and different and crazy, and somebody likes it but somebody else doesn't like it? What does it mean to be who we really are? Parker Palmer says this. He says the soul is like a wild animal, tough, resilient, savvy, self-sufficient, and yet exceedingly shy. If we want to see a wild animal, the last thing we should do is go crashing through the woods, shouting for the creature to come out. But if we're willing to walk quietly into the woods and sit silently for an hour or two at the base of a tree, the creature we're waiting for may well emerge. And out of the corner of an eye, we'll catch a glimpse of the precious wildness we seek. Deep inside of you is a wild adventure, is a wilding that needs to be brought forward. And there is a connection that we have with things in the external world that root us and connect us to what is deep and true about us. Like that beautiful place Tony just tapped into to let that wild thing out that he sang to us in a way that has never been sung quite before. And what Parker Palmer says is that in pursuit of that uniqueness, of that soul quality, of that something that's not been conditioned and cultured out of us, that's totally acceptable to everybody we meet, right? The way to that place deep within us is that we have to sit in it. We have to be with it. We have to wait for it. We have to look for it. And the thing of it is that we spend so much time in our heads that we have a tendency to scare these things off. You know, animals in the wild think we're crazy. No, they really do. They think we're crazy because this is what we look like to them. We look like this. We're like, oh gosh, I don't know. I've just got to figure out. I don't know what I'm going to do. Something's got to happen, and we got to change that. Oh, I don't know why I said it just like that. I should have said it differently. And listen, stop that. Run over here and get that right now and start. You know, we look insane to animals. We do. I'm sure our pets worry about us. I'm sure if they're praying animals, you know, they say prayers for us because we look insane. And you notice I did that without a phone. Imagine what we look like with a phone, where we're just who even knows? You see, we're not connected to everything that's around us. Animals in the natural world see things in a whole way. They're not just taking in a narrow band of information. They're not just listening for words, for one thing. They're not just listening for particular sounds necessarily. They respond to certain sounds, but they are taking in everything. That is the natural way of life, to be taking in everything and to be seeing things as they are. And to be responding, not making things happen, not damaging things, not stomping through and crashing out and yelling and trying to cut things down and build something right over here that's just mine. It's sharing and being part of everything. It's different. Nature has natural patterns that if we spend those 2 hours, Parker Palmer was suggesting, sitting at the base of a tree and just being for a while without your phone. He didn't say that, but should have. But you're just there. You'll begin to see patterns of leaves, patterns of shade, patterns of twigs and sometimes pine needles on the ground. Patterns, they make different patterns. And you know what? If you look at them long enough, and if you just allow yourself to go soft focus, they start to rewire your brain. Because there's a pattern that is healing and nurturing and whole. And it begins to bring peace and calm and nonlinear experience to you. See, we're linear doers and beers. You know, okay, well, I'm going to go from here. I'm going to walk over there. I'm going to come back. I'm going to get this. We have things. We have lists, right? We've got check-off things, stuff to do, right? That's a very linear kind of way of living. But nature doesn't function that way. It's not purposeful. It's efficient. It's responsive. It's motivated by what the next call is and what next thing needs to be done and how to move from here and allow this to serve this, not the other way around. This is how we are naturally wired. I started you off with a water meditation, just a little bit of a taste to let you know that water itself is a purifying natural element we can't live without, which we know. We're made up of mostly water. We've heard that before. We know that water is important, pure water. And yet it is also it's a holy thing. And it purifies and it calms us. It's peaceful and mesmerizing to watch it flow, to watch it move, to watch it, listen to it. Observe it. How many times have you sat next to a creek or a river or a brook or a spring or the ocean or a lake and just marveled at it, or a beautiful waterfall? Oh, we don't see that many here in Texas, but in places that we visited that do have those, they're magical. Water, just water flowing with gravity, is powerful and beautiful. The wind, sound, almost like voices, almost like speech, calls when it gales, when it just barely touches our cheek with a breeze. Wind, air, moving, air, pushing things in big, terrible ways at times, and in subtle, gentle, unrelenting ways at other times. The energies and vibrations of the earth that we don't always perceive, but there are vibrations, there is crystalline nature in all of these things, and there's a vibration that some of us are attuned to, but others of us are just in the field of that energy. Gravity holds us in place. This is an amazing experience that we just lose sight of, that we don't allow ourselves to be in touch with. Trees and all creatures are intelligent beings, and we walk right past them. Or we allow them to be killed on our behalf, or we allow ourselves to be inured to their purpose, and their real purpose is as partners with us on this planet, in this time. There are a lot of things that will come into right relationship that are necessary for our own survival. Everybody's talking about climate change and its effect, and here in Houston, we know some of the worst effects, don't we? We see them in other parts of the world and other parts of our own country. There's got to be answers for that, but the answers really have to come from a right relationship, a way in which we recognize this matters to me. I need to know what my right place is with all of this, because I'm a natural being and you're a natural being. We are of nature, not around it, not need to get to it every now and then, or need to get around it to get to the things we want to do, but rather be aware that we are a part of it. Henry Crowdog says, "The earth is a living thing. Mountains speak. Trees sing. Lakes can think. Pebbles have a soul. Rocks have power." This is known to indigenous people, to the people from which we have come. They are our ancestors. This is coded into us as well. We've just not been taught it and long forgotten it, most of us. But it is time for us to reawaken to it. Not only does the world need it, but most importantly, we do. For our own health, for our own well-being, for our peace of mind. Finding our way back to the wild things that we are, and to live in accordance with that. You've heard the name Gaia used. It represents the spirit nature of Mother Earth, just the whole planet, and the and the attendant atmosphere all around it, and all of the energies around it. It's all of what is encased and involved in that, and we are of that spirit. We are in that field of energy. It's what enlivens us. It is what connects us. It's what makes our hearts tick and our minds work and our blood to flow. There is a deeper connection to all of life, and it comes through all that is. All the creatures, all those that are more than human, plant people, as indigenous people refer to them, stone people, standing people are the trees, the standing people, or the saguaro cactus. All elements of creation are alive, intelligent, connected, and responsive. They know you're here. Do you know they are? Emily Cady in Lessons in Truth says this, in case you think I'm just making this stuff up, that I just woke up one day with, maybe had a little stroke or something, and I just started feeling all of this stuff. Maybe that happened, I don't know. But what I'll tell you is that Emily Cady blew me away as a science major when I first came into Unity, when I was starting this teaching. And right away, she said something I had a tough time getting over. She said, there is no absence of life, substance, or intelligence anywhere. I was like, well, I could name some things that I thought there was no life in, that there was no substance, that there was no intelligence in. Rock, I'm pretty sure that's what I had learned. But the more I read and the more that I concentrated my thinking around if God is everywhere present, if God is all of these things, if God is everywhere present and God is all of these things, then am I saying there's some place where it isn't? That is so stronger than God, that keeps God's stuff out of it? And then my brain broke open. And I began to realize, what would it be like to live in a world where there was intelligence in rock? Do I live in that world? I had to think about that for a long time. I had to do what she said. I had to affirm it over and over until I could really begin to contemplate, how is it that intelligence itself isn't locked up in a cranium or in a brain or even what we call a mind, which is more or less a non-local field of some sort, but rather intelligence underpins everything and is used by everything in perfect measure, in a perfect coordinated planned way, with the whole way in which everything is in harmony with everything else. When we don't interfere, when we go with a natural rhythm, when we go with the way things are meant to be, when we behave in the way we're meant to be. To communicate with life of the earth in all of its many forms, we did it naturally as children. Do you remember that? Do you remember going exploring in creeks and rivers and woods, in yards, in abandoned old buildings, in an empty lot somewhere, and go and see what was growing there and what lived there, turning things over? Even in my own backyard, locked away from the rest of the world because my mom needed a nap and I couldn't go anywhere, I was forced to explore my own backyard and find an infinite number of things that were growing there and living there, and subtle little hills just in my backyard that I ran right over and didn't know, but what's under that? And made up stories in my head about what it was and what it could be, and climbed a tree to see as far as I could and to go with the wind, with the tree taking me back and forth. And if it got to be this much, I came down a little ways because this was too scary. But I lived in the trees. And I think they talked to me. I think they did. We did it naturally. Animals, birds, fairies, sprites, wind, smoke, stones, crystals, rainbows, sunsets, butterflies, dragonflies. Whatever it was that drew your attention, whatever it was that seemed amazing to you, to me. Listening, watching, feeling, expanding our senses returns us to our natural state, and it feeds our souls. It's like returning to our natural home because we are natural beings. Our spirituality is native to us. It isn't something that you learned or were taught. Religion is something we learned or were taught. But that's not the same thing as your native spirituality, your native awe, your native understanding that something greater than you exists. And at times when you are just being in that soft focus, in that totally immersed moment where you can feel everything happening, this is a moment where you are embraced by something greater than yourself. This is why spending time in nature renews us. You see, we belong to the earth and all of creation. We're not just voyeurs. We're not just visitors. When I tell you to go in nature, I don't mean to go in, separate from it, like you're on an exploration of some sort, or you're like a scientist. You can be a scientist if you want to do that. I mean, as a participant in it, to smell it and feel it and taste it and be of it, and to recognize it's giving you information about you. It's responding to you, even as you walk along a path or off the path and through the brush or across the grasses or around a tree or at the base of a tree or on a rock or near water of any kind. These are the things that are reinvigorating you because you are of these things. Those things, every element that you can find out there, you have in your body. Your body is of these things. You are a microcosm of everything that's out there. And that's what heals you, connects you, teaches you, makes you whole. John Burroughs says, to find the universal elements enough, to find the air and the water exhilarating, to be refreshed by a morning walk or an evening saunter, to be thrilled by the stars at night, to be elated over a bird's nest or a wildflower in spring, which we have plenty of in Texas. We can hoo-hoo about that. These are some of the rewards of the simple life, he says. 360-degree awareness is a practice you can regain. We did it. We did it when we lived out in nature all the time. Our indigenous ancestors, no matter where we've come from, all had to have 360 awareness. What is that? It's not just looking straight ahead because your eyeballs are going straight ahead, or just your head can turn from shoulder to shoulder and that's enough. Not when you're out in the woods. Not when you're trying to catch your dinner and you've got your eye on it, right? And you have to hide behind something and try to make sure that you're not seen before you have made your attempt to snag this animal to take it home. You need to have your 360 awareness going, especially then. Why? Because something might be scoping you out to take you home for dinner. And you need to be aware. How can you be aware if your eyes are straight forward? Because you have the capacity to feel into a 360 field all around you, and you still have that capacity. It's like going underwater. When you go underwater, and you can feel suddenly that you've dropped down into, and you look around yourself, and it's like this, it's like a huge room, right, that goes on in every direction. If you're not just where you're looking, but if you sort of sense yourself being present, you can feel all around you. You can begin to feel, at least in your immediate area. If you're sitting outside, practice knowing without turning around what's going on behind you. And then after a little bit, turn around and take it in and see what you're seeing, and see if you can turn back and feel where those bushes start and where that rock is. Does it feel different to you? Can you just sense it? Just don't work hard at it. Just notice it. You have the capacity to feel all around you. You are of this place. You are in it. You are a hologram of it. Standing people, trees, have purpose to teach us about resilience and flexibility. They are networked with one another while also being home to birds and animals and even insects. They live long lives when they're healthy, and planted in favorable conditions, much like humans, they live long. They visibly change with the seasons and respond to cycles as do humans. They are the bridges between the air and the earth, even transforming carbon dioxide to oxygen. They are the very lungs of Gaia herself. We depend on them. Their deep roots grow into the past, while their branches and leaves stretch high into the future. Standing people ground us and lend us their wisdom if we reach out to them. You know, to sit and hug, to sit at the base of a tree or to hug a tree seems like a colloquial thing, something that we've kind of know about. I'm just going to tell you that in a few exercises that I've led here on this campus, with the intention for people to get to know some of the trees on this property, on this campus, changes people who've been here years, who've gone from building to building, from event to event, with purpose, right? And walked right past some of the most beautiful trees that we can encounter that have deep roots and big, deep wisdom for us. And sit in front of them and speak to them and allow them to speak to you. Do it in your yard. Do it wherever it is that you walk. Do it wherever, but befriend one tree and let that be your wisdom tree. Joy Harjo says, remember the plants, trees, animal life who all have their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Speaking of poems, Carmen Fraser had written this poem also about the tree. Carmen Fraser's in our community, and she took one of the retreat that I had done, and she shared this with me. I share it with you. She says, be like a tree, firm and strong with deep roots and flexible branches. Maybe old, but still stands, still growing, still waiting. Be like a tree, it never complains about the heat of the summer or the snow of the winter, swaying with the wind, always grateful, with its branches reaching up. Be like a tree, firm and strong, with deep roots so you never forget where you have come from. Keep growing and waiting with your arms reaching up, praising God. What they can teach us. So what does this have to do with your spirituality? Because I'm supposed to be talking about spirituality, and did I get like all pagan on you all of a sudden, you know? Did I just go kind of crazy? Yeah, I went a little crazy, but I think in a really good way. The beginning of the shared scriptures of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam starts with creation stories. Did you remember that? How we got here? But what is it? All the creatures, all the wind and the sun and the earth and the sky, the water, and when it was put all together in a great way. Humanity comes into being with all the creatures of the earth and are given them. And food is provided just from the beauty and the bounty of the earth. And the garden is a paradise until blame and shame and anger and jealousy and envy all come into being and threw us out. Who or what is God anyway? Can we ever hope to see God? I gave that up some time ago. I used to think that's what would happen when I died and went to heaven or the other side of things. Throughout my teachings and growth and everything, I finally came to a conclusion that I don't guess I'm going to see a face of God after all. I guess I thought I would. I was going to sit on God's knee and God was going to tell me how everything really is. Give me all the answers to all the ways of the world, how things are supposed to be. I mean, I thought all the answers would come if I could just make it there, right? And now I realize that it's not really it. And actually, at some level, I don't really want it to be that. I don't want it to be any kind of being whose knee I can sit on that's going to tell me how everything is, because I don't know what happens after that. Kind of sounds boring to me. So that's not it, or at least that's not what I want it to be. What if our enlightenment is waking up to the field that is all life, love, substance, intelligence, to that field that Emily Cady was telling me about? That there's a field of energy, and it is embracing and creating and continuously bringing life into many forms, right here, right in our experience, right through us, as us. What if our communion with all that is what connects us to what also loves us? What if love itself has brought us here? Love itself is what we're discovering. Love itself has split itself into a million, billion different forms and ways of being, and wants us to discover what that is and what it is in us, and who are we and how are we a part of it, and what pattern do we belong to. Robin Wall Kimmerer says, knowing that you love the earth changes you. It activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street into a sacred bond. Sit with a tree and ask it for some wisdom, and ask it for a gift, and allow the tree to give you a gift. And before you bend and pick it up, is it that acorn? Is it that pine cone? Is it that leaf? Ask it, is it okay if I take this? Is this for me? And know that you can know the answer to that, or wait for the next thing. And then you will know that you have a relationship with something that you never realized knew you already, and was just standing here with infinite patience, waiting for you to ask for love. I'm going to invite you, as a wild thing, to return to the place where you are loved the best of all. And you will be able to smell your supper is still warm. God bless you all.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.